Okay, so welcome back to part 2 of my 6-part series on how to grow your glutes, how to train most effectively and most efficiently, what exercise you need to use, and things you need to consider when you are training your glutes to get the most out of them. Now, in part 1, I talked about the 3 different functions of the glute. I talked about the 2 different muscles that you might want to train in the glutes, and also how one of those muscles has 2 different functions as part of it, and how to get the most out of those. In this video today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. So we're going to look at 2 exercises specifically. We're going to look at the RDL, and we're going to look at a Bulgarian split squat. The reason I've chosen these 2 exercises is because we are looking at exercises where you train the glutes in a lengthened position. We're going to talk about why that's important and why that tension relationship with lengthened exercises is super valuable when glute growth is your primary goal. Okay, so I talked about why doing some lengthened position exercises is really important, but I didn't really explain why that was and how to do that. So I'm going to make sure we cover that now. So we're going to look at the RDL first and foremost. Now, if I just get Sophie to go to the bottom of her RDL, so don't worry about it being perfect, I'll coach you through it. But if Sophie goes to the bottom of her RDL, what you can see here, I'll get her to hold it. So if you just stop there, at the bottom of the RDL, what we have more than anything is more stretch in the glutes. So if we think about the glutes attaching kind of up here and down here, or the glute max specifically, attaching down here and up here, if we move the upper leg right around here, as you can see is happening in the RDL, the upper leg is around here, what we're actually getting there is a stretch on that glute max, which is going to be really, really important if we want to lengthen it and get tension through that lengthened position. So here in this RDL, so if you can stand up now, that's where there is going to be the most tension on that exercise. At the top here, where Sophie is now, there isn't really any tension. And this is why just squeezing your glutes is actually not very useful at all. If when Sophie comes here to the top of her RDL and she just squeezes her glutes, it will add more sensation and it might feel like, oh, I'm squeezing my glutes, I'm getting more out of it. There's actually no tension on the muscle as such. So if I just get Sophie to go through that motion again for me, if you just do me a few reps and keep going, you'll see as she goes to the bottom of her RDL, she hits peak tension here. This is where the glutes are the most stretch. If there was a lot of weight on that bar, that's where she'd find that most difficult. And at the top here, she probably doesn't really feel anything. That's actually more of a rest. And you'll notice this when people train their RDLs, they might even pause at the top just to have a bit of a breather and get their breath back. There's not really any tension there at the top. So a good way to get tension on the glute is to lengthen it and take it to a lengthened range of motion, massive amounts of tension, and then come back to the top. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is this tension so important? Mechanical tension is the main driver for muscle growth. If you want to grow any muscle, whether that's glutes or biceps or chest or back, mechanical tension is going to be your main driver. So for Sophie, you can stop there now if you want to put the bar down. For Sophie or for anybody who is trying to grow their glutes, they want to get the maximum amount of that mechanical tension through that muscle. A lot of people at this point, they refer to a myth, which is a myth that you break down muscle and then you rebuild it stronger. So when you're going through an exercise, you break the muscle down, you rip it apart, you create tiny tears in the muscle, and then you fill it with protein and it grows back stronger. That's not actually true, or that's only part of the truth and part of the picture. The reason that an RDL is so effective for growing and training the glutes is because there is massive amounts of tension in that bottom position. That tension is the driver of muscle growth. Not so much the breakdown of the muscle, the tension. The tension sends a signal to the muscle to say, hey, we're struggling here, we need to get stronger, we need to be more adapted to taking this pressure and taking this tension. So that's why you grow muscle. It's a signaling thing, not so much a tearing of muscles and growing back stronger. That's quite a simplistic way of looking at muscle growth. What we're going to do now is look at the Bulgarian split squat, because it's another opportunity to train the glute through a lengthened range of motion. The RDL stretches the glute and it's hardest in the stretch position. The same with the Bulgarian split squat. So we'll bring a bench in and I'm going to show you that. Okay, so we talked during the RDL about getting it to a lengthened position, stretching the RDL, and how at the bottom of that RDL, when Sophie was right down here, that's when her glute was stretched, but also that's the hardest part of that movement. Well, we can do a very similar thing with the Bulgarian split squat. So at the top of this movement, you'll see, if you ignore her back leg, she's standing upright. That's very, very similar to where she was at the top of the RDL. There's not really any tension there. The glute's not really having to work. It's probably stabilizing a little bit, but it's not really having to work much. If I ask Sophie to just go down to the bottom, I won't make you hold it for very long. But if I make Sophie go down to the bottom there, what you'll see here is the glute's now lengthened. So if you think about where the glute starts and it attaches up here, and how the glute max attaches down here, how that glute's now lengthened and wrapped around her frame, and in its like fully stretched and fully lengthened position. This is also the hardest part of that movement. So not only is it lengthened, being at the bottom here is really hard versus being at the top. So if we want to train the glute through a lengthened position, Bulgarian split squats are also a very good option. If I just get you to stand back to the top again, there, that's it. Now, some things that you can do, and you'll remember this from video 1, I talked about how externally rotating the hip gives you some upper glute max. So what I've just shown you with the RDL and what I've just shown you with the Bulgarian split squat here is the lower glute max being stretched, worked to its maximum in that lengthened position. But you can get it to be more glute medius and potentially more upper glute max by adding one very slight variation. So, Sophie, this time I'm going to ask you to, as you come down towards the floor, I'm going to ask you to rotate inwards towards this leg here. So if you do that for me, let's do a couple of reps of that. Okay, cool. So obviously Sophie might be holding dumbbells when she does this normally, but you'll see here, if you just do me a couple of reps, as she inwardly rotates, what that adds is a rotational element, but also a stability element to the outside of the glute too. So if Sophie, or when I'm programming for a client, if I wanted to get a little bit more glute medius or upper glute max, what I might do is add a rotational element to this exercise so that we just take it a little bit further away from the glute max lower, bring it more to the glute max upper and glute medius. Now, there's another thing to consider when you're doing Bulgarians, and that is the quad to glute relationship. So Sophie can very, very easily make this exercise more quad biased or more glute biased. And you need to understand that when you're selecting your exercises, an exercise doesn't necessarily inherently train the glutes well just because it's a Bulgarian split squat. You may, by the way you perform it, make it a little bit more quad focused. So if I get Sophie to come back into position, and if she comes down to the bottom for me, what you're going to see here is Sophie sat back into the bench. So she's probably not got enough movement there to perform this exercise properly. So I'm going to just ask her to shuffle her front foot forwards, come to the top, shuffle your front foot forwards a little bit, and then just do the same thing again. Okay, so currently what you'll notice with Sophie is her knee is directly above her midfoot. So the glute's going to be taking a lot of the work there. She's sat reasonably far back and she's leant over, making this quite glute. You feel that in your glute? It's quite hard to hold, right? But if I just ask you to shift your knee as far forwards as you can, lift your chest up and be more upright. So instead of arching your back, think about like leaning back a little bit. There we go, right? Push your knee forwards again for me. There. So what we're actually doing here, and I know it's going to be hard for you to hold, so you can come out of that, but what we're actually doing is by pushing the knee forwards, if you stand still a second, by pushing the knee forwards, I'll show you here myself, pushing the knee forwards, we close the gap between the femur or the hamstring and the calf here. So by doing that, you get more flexion in the quad. We'll talk about quads in another series that I'm going to do, and you shift some work away from the glute. The more upright we have the calf here and the shin, the more upright we have here, the more glute we're going to have. But we can also, if you think about that stretch relationship we've been talking about, if you lean over and have an upright shin here, that's where you're going to maximize the stretch in the glute, but also the tension in the glute. If I then shift my knee forwards, it becomes a bit more quad. If I then go upright, you'll see the stretch has kind of come away from the glute now. There's much less stretch in there, much less tension in there, but there's loads of stretch and loads of tension in the quad here. So by shifting back and forwards, but also by leaning forwards and leaning back, you can completely change whether you're training quads or whether you're training glutes. So what I've covered for you in this video here is we've talked about the RDL and how in that lengthened position, it's going to be the hardest, the glute's going to be in the most stretch, so therefore that's going to be beneficial for glute growth and getting the most out of your glute training. What we then talked about was the Bulgarian split squat and how with the Bulgarian split squat, the way you perform it is going to be really, really important for the outcome you get from it, but also why, similarly to the RDL, it is ultimately going to be a stretch exercise or a lengthened exercise, which is going to be, again, very beneficial if you want to get the most out of your glute training to make it effective and efficient. Okay, so if you've enjoyed this video here, you're going to enjoy the rest of the series as well. We'll get more into the depths of training glutes and all the nuances that you need to know. If you want to find some more of my content, my Instagram is a great place to go for that. Body Composition Coach is where you can find me. You'll also find a link there where you can find my YouTube, my Spotify, all of my Instagram content, and most importantly, how you can work with me one-to-one if you want to get into the depths and the details of how to apply this stuff on you specifically. I'll see you on the next video.